By 1991, Anthrax had just come off one of the heaviest albums of their career. Persistence of Time was dense, serious, and relentless, and the band knew it. So when it came time to figure out what came next, rather than jump straight into another full studio record, they decided to take a breath and give fans something a little different, something fun. A compilation of odds and ends, deep cuts, covers, rarities, the kind of stuff that had been floating around the edges of their catalog that deserved a proper release. The result was Attack of the Killer Bees, and honestly, it ended up being one of the most important things they ever put out. Released on June 25, 1991 through Megaforce Worldwide and Island Entertainment, Killer Bees wasn't a lazy cash grab. This was the band with a genuine personality showing you who they really were when the cameras weren't rolling. Every track on here tells you something about Anthrax that the studio albums don't quite capture, so let's run through it. They open with Milk, Ode to Billy, a cover of the SOD track. For the uninitiated, SOD, or Stormtroopers of Death, was a crossover thrash side project featuring Anthrax's own Scott Ian and Charlie Benante. So covering SOD is basically Anthrax covering themselves, which is exactly the kind of move this band would pull. They also throw in Chromatic Death later in the record, another SOD track, and the two together act almost like a little nod to that whole chapter of the band's history. Then just Keep It in the Family, captured live in Birmingham in 1990, a track from Persistence of Time that absolutely rips on stage. If you ever wondered whether the album translated live, the answer is right here on this track. Next is Startin Up, a Posse, and that's where the band's political side and their sense of humor crash into each other at full speed. This one is a direct shot at Tipper Gore and the PMRC, the Parents Music Resource Center, that spent the late 80s trying to police what musicians could and couldn't say. Anthrax's response was to pack as many profanities into a single song as humanly possible, wrap it in a country metal parody, and put it on record forever. The lyrics go out of their way to call out the hypocrisy of politicians spending energy trying to censor artists while the real problems go ignored. It's funny, it's mean, and it's completely sincere at the same time. Protest and Survive is a cover of the UK hardcore punk band Discharge, and exactly what you expect: raw, aggressive, and over before you had time to process it. Anthrax have always worn their punk roots on their sleeve, and this is them paying that debt directly. I'm the Man 99 is an updated version of the 1987 rap metal track, already a landmark moment in the band's catalog. Punched up for the new decade, it holds up, it's still ridiculous in the best possible way. Parasite is a Kiss cover because of course it is. Anthrax take it, speed it up, thrash it out, turn it into something that sounds like it always should have been, a metal track. Pipeline follows, an instrumental cover of the Shantae's classic 1960s surf rock anthem. When they pushed it through a full metal treatment, it shouldn't work on paper, but it absolutely does. Sex is a cover of a track originally recorded by French heavy metal band Trust, and you know they covered Trust before with Antisocial. We all know that. Belly of the Beast is another live cut from Birmingham, and then the album closes with N.F.B, Dallabnikufesin, something like that. It's basically backwards where you say nice fucking ballad. Our love was meant to be, oh baby. And it's a comedic takedown on all these glam metal ballads, like power ballads that were popular at the time. I remember reading about this in a magazine, and they said they wrote it in like 5 minutes, and it's just something, it's just like a 3-chord progression on an acoustic guitar. They're just strumming, and they just made up the lyrics quickly, and they just did it as a closer. It's just funny, so you gotta check that out. But I saved one song because I want to spend some more time with it. It's Bring the Noise. How low can you go? Death row? What a brother, no, once again, back here's the end. And I saved it for last because it deserved its own moment. It wasn't just a cool track on a compilation album, it was a cultural event. To understand why Anthrax did this, you have to understand Scott Ian's relationship with hip-hop. This wasn't a guy who liked hip-hop occasionally or respected it from a distance. Ian was a genuine, committed fan, particularly of Public Enemy. He wore their shirts on stage. He talked about Chuck D the way metal fans talk about Dio or Plant, with his total reverence for the power of the voice. Ian's argument, which he made public and repeatedly, was that Chuck D's vocal delivery was heavy in the exact way a distorted guitar riff was heavy. The aggression, the authority, the sheer weight of it. Ian felt those two things belonged together. And then something happened that made the whole thing feel like destiny. In 1987, Chuck D attended an Anthrax show. The intensity of the thrash metal performance clearly left an impression, because he went back and name-checked the band directly in the original Public Enemy version of Bring the Noise. When Anthrax heard their name in a Public Enemy track, that hypothetical collaboration stopped being hypothetical, it became a mission. During the Persistence of Time sessions in 1990, Ian pitched the idea to the rest of the band. He took the original tracks' horn samples and transposed them into heavy guitar riffs. Charlie Benante built a metal interpretation of the iconic funky drum beat underneath it, and then Ian called Chuck D. Chuck D was skeptical, so was producer Rick Rubin. Their instinct was to scrap the original and write something new together. Ian's response was to mail them a cassette demo of what they'd already put together. Chuck D called back. His exact words reportedly, "Holy shit, this is slamming. When do you need us?" Here's where it gets interesting though, and this is the part people didn't know for years. Public Enemy mailed a tape of their vocal stems to Anthrax in New York. Neither Island Records nor Rick Rubin knew that the vocals were entirely sampled and then manually engineered by the band. Scott Ian and Charlie Benante spent a week in a New York studio cutting tape by hand, isolating vocal lines, and syncing Chuck D's delivery to the track, and it ran significantly faster than the original 1987 hip-hop version. Line by line, snare hit by snare hit, analog, no computers, no shortcuts, full week of work to make it sound like something was built in a room together. It worked so well, Chuck D loved it, Public Enemy loved it enough to include the same exact recording as the closing track on their own 1991 album, Apocalypse 91, The Enemy Strikes Back. Two bands, two albums, one shared track. That doesn't happen. And then they went on tour together. Fall of 1991, a co-headlining North American run. At the time, this was considered a genuine gamble. Metalheads and hip-hop fans were viewed as separate, sometimes actively hostile subcultures. Venues were worried about what would happen when those two audiences shared the same floor. What actually happened was the opposite of disaster. Crowds blended, people moshed together, danced together, introduced each other's music they never heard before every single night. Ended with both bands on stage simultaneously performing Bring the Noise as a 10-piece group to an arena that had completely lost its mind. Chuck D later said touring with Anthrax felt like touring with family. Shared buses, shared dressing rooms. The only real ride or demand from Public Enemy's camp was that venues not serve warm beer. The tour proved something the industry didn't want to believe, that heavy music and hip-hop drew from the same well. The same rebellion, the same aggression, the same need to make people feel something at maximum volume. That idea ripped outward. By 1993, you had the Judgment Night soundtrack, a full album pairing metal and hip-hop acts, built entirely on the blueprint Anthrax and Public Enemy had laid down 2 years earlier. Biohazard with Onyx, Helmet with House of Pain, Slayer with Ice-T. None of that happens without Bring the Noise existing first. Attack of the Killer Bees went gold and earned a Grammy nomination for Best Metal Performance in 1992. It introduced a generation of metal fans to Public Enemy and a generation of hip-hop fans to Anthrax. Not a bad run for a B-sides compilation. But here's the thing, while all that was happening, the tour, the crossover moment, the cultural noise, something was quietly going wrong inside the band. The next chapter is a difficult one. Joey Belladonna is on his way out the door, and the replacement Anthrax turned to was someone almost nobody saw coming. So that will be the next episode. In the meantime, check out this playlist, The Story of Anthrax. I'm talking about all of the Anthrax albums and adjacent bands like SOD. I'll do a few others. There'll be a few surprises down the road. So that's all going to be in this playlist. I make them as I add them, and I add them as I make them. That's what I meant to say. But anyway, like and subscribe. See you in the next one.